We're kind of like a human model for a mouse with journalistic spectrum disorder.
Sounds pretty cool. Sounds interesting. Good evening, and welcome to the Autism Blogcast Special Report. I'm Jim Mancini.
And I'm Rafe Bernier. We continue to bring you the inside scoop in autism news and information from the heights of the ivory towers down into the dregs of the sewers and alleys.
All right, well, relatedly, this month we're focusing on autism research and mice models. Now, Rafe, I have to admit, I'm a clinician. I don't really see the point. I don't see the clinical application. When I read an article about a mice model, how is that relevant to what I do?
You know, it's a good question, Jim. Well, I think the first thing I want to highlight is that mouse models have a lot to do with helping us understand the causes of autism, the mechanisms involved in autism, and even can help us provide some information about treatments for autism.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned causes. How do mice allow us to understand the cause of autism?
Well, we think about it this way. There's a lot of different risk factors that have been proposed to cause autism, things from genetic events to exposures in utero to various toxins and such. And what you can do with a mouse model is you can test that. You can maybe make a mutation to a particular gene, see what the outcome of that mutation to that gene is on the mouse phenotype.
Okay, so mice models might give us a little information about genetics or possible environmental risks.
Sure, right, and there's been a lot of work that's been done in that. A good example would be mice that have been exposed to valproic acid, for example. By following the outcomes after a mouse has been exposed to valproic acid in utero, we can look at the phenotype, see the outcome and say, given that change in the phenotype, there might be some a connection there in terms of causal factors.
So phenotypes, you mean the mouse's behavior?
Right. Phenotype meaning the outward expression of the genotype. So this could be cognition, language, could be physical development, things like that.
Okay. So, all right. Well, that makes sense a little bit. How about treatments? How do mice models help us with treatment models?
Well, I guess in sort of a similar way, what we would see is if we have a potential mouse model and we can provide a treatment or intervention to that mouse and see if that intervention changes the phenotype, changes that behavior, and kind of normalizes that behavior, reduces the more atypical behavior.
Okay. So, for example, medications. You might try certain medication using a mouse model, and that would allow us to get information about the effectiveness before we might use it on people.
Exactly
Okay.
right. Yeah.
So, but what are you treating? Are you treating autism?
Well, that's kind of a tricky question. Not sure we want to say that a mouse has autism per se, but that does bring up a good point about mouse models. What we want to be doing is we want to be able to assess and characterize a phenotype, and want to make sure that phenotype, at least conceptually, is similar to or mimics the behaviors that we see in a human with autism.
Okay, so, is there like a mouse ADOS? Is it a MADOS?
Right, no MADOS right now, but what scientists do is they do things like take a mouse that's a potential mouse model, put that in a cage with another mouse, and they look at social interactions and communication. So they might track the amount of time that the mouse is sniffing or following or grooming, or count the number of vocalizations, or the focus on olfactory pheromone responses, or might even look at quantifying behaviors, things like stereotypic jumping or self-grooming. Looking at all those patterns of behavior that conceptually kind of can be like autism.
Okay, so sniffing behaviors or other social behaviors that would be typical for a mouse, or the presence of any atypical behaviors like repetitive jumping, those would give us a little information about the possibility of autism.
Right, exactly. And it's not like there's a DSM-5 for autism in mice, but when you get enough of a collection of these particular patterns, you can start to say, oh, well, it seems pretty confident this is playing a role in autism, or this particular event is playing a role in autism, or this treatment might be helpful to sort of ameliorate some of these challenges.
Okay, so we've got evaluation, we've got causes, we've got treatments. Wow, it sounds almost clinical.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it is pretty clinical, right? Because what we can do is it helps us understand causes, mechanism, treatments, so we can detect autism earlier, intervene earlier, and develop interventions that are really targeted to a given individual.
Okay, well, fair enough. All right, well, that's it for this month's blogcast. We'll see you next time.